the problem is, and I see this more often than not by a lot of analysts that have identified the problem with Trump's side on this issue, is that Trump automatically considers any negotiation to be a point of weakness for the opposition.
So Hasan Piker just exposed how Trump's sabotaging his own diplomacy while serving Israeli interests over American ones. This analysis cuts through the noise to show Trump's negotiation failures are creating an economic crisis that's pushing allies toward China. Let's break down this diplomatic disaster.
Trump has been begging for a negotiation to take place since like week 2 of Operation Epstein's Fury. But the very fact that Iran said yes to that negotiation in Islamabad, Trump misunderstood as weakness.
This captures the fundamental paradox perfectly. Trump spent weeks publicly demanding negotiations. Then when Iran agreed, he interpreted their willingness as surrender rather than diplomacy. It's like asking someone to negotiate, then assuming they're weak when they say yes.
Although Iran obviously still holds the cards because of the situation on the ground, Donald Trump looked at Iran's willingness to come to the ceasefire negotiations table as a point of weakness and tried to tweet out maximalist demands, which frustrated Iran deeply. And not only did he tweet out maximalist demands that were not discussed on the bargaining table in the negotiations process, but also he continued to implement this blockade outside of the Iranian toll system, rendering the negotiations fruitless.
The Twitter diplomacy is key here. Trump violated the most basic rule of negotiations. Don't change the terms publicly while talks are ongoing. Iran held strategic leverage through the strait, but Trump's maximalist tweets and continued blockade destroyed any trust.
Iran warns of significantly greater costs if war resumes. From Dropsite News, a senior Iranian official with direct access to Tehran's internal deliberations told Dropsite that if Trump resumes bombing, Iran will cut off all diplomatic channels and focus entirely on fighting, and that conditions for any future deal will be far harder. He also told Dropsite, our assessment is that Trump effectively lacks both a coherent plan and the capacity to secure even a temporary agreement.
Dropsite News has incredibly well-placed sources in Tehran. When senior Iranian officials tell Western media that Trump lacks coherent plans, that's devastating. They're essentially calling the American president incompetent in his own language, through his own press.
His decision-making appears to be grounded in Israeli political and security assessments conveyed to him on a daily basis. There hasn't been any real progress. Both sides are just signaling behind the scenes that they're open to reaching an agreement. The Islamabad negotiations provide President Trump with an appropriate opportunity to exit the war.
This reveals Trump's fundamental problem. He's getting daily briefings from Israeli intelligence, not American strategic assessments. Iran is literally offering him a face-saving exit from a war that's damaging U.S. interests, but Israeli influence prevents him from taking it.
What's insane about the situation is Trump, on the one hand, recognizes the need for a diplomatic end to this war. But on the other hand, anytime the Iranian side agrees to a diplomatic end to this war, Trump perceives that as weakness.
It's like a hostage negotiator who gets angry every time the hostage taker agrees to talk. Trump's psychology treats diplomatic engagement as weakness, making actual resolution impossible. This mindset guarantees escalation rather than solutions.
Now, what's interesting about this is that that is the Israeli position. But what's also doubly interesting about that is that whenever Trump talks about blowing up Iran and like ending Iranian civilization, well, oftentimes that means he really wants to do a negotiation, right? That's just like the Trumpian method. The Trump method is saying the most unhinged thing possible and then behind closed doors try to come to the table with a negotiations process. I mean, that's literally what has happened every single time.
This worked with North Korea because the stakes were lower and Kim wanted legitimacy. But in active military conflicts, this approach destroys trust. When lives are being lost daily, diplomatic games become dangerous provocations that escalate rather than resolve.
This again stems from the fact that Donald Trump is inconsistent and also doesn't make any sense whatsoever, which is, I guess, a part of his method here. But it's frustrating when it's not just his statements that don't make any sense, but it's his actions that also don't make any sense. Statements alone would not sully this deal. What is actually harming the negotiations process is two things. One,
exactly right. Rhetorical chaos is one thing, but policy chaos destroys negotiations. When your actions contradict your stated goals, other nations can't trust any agreement you make. Inconsistency becomes a strategic liability in serious diplomacy.
One, Trump's willingness to obviously lean into whatever the Benjamin Netanyahu's demands are, which is obviously to destroy this deal and then destroy Iran, get America to invade Iran militarily, boost on the ground military warfare. But the other problem here is also Trump is still abiding by the ridiculous conditions that he's set forward and not scaling back on that, which includes the double block that they are trying to engage in.
Netanyahu has every incentive to sabotage U.S.-Iran diplomacy. He wants America fighting Iran indefinitely. The blockade violates ceasefire terms and international maritime law, giving Iran legal justification to resume military operations while portraying America as the aggressor.
To understand how Trump is undermining his own diplomacy by quickly declaring victory and trying to humiliate Iran whenever Tehran takes a de-escalatory step, it is instructive to remember what happened when Iran and the GCC had negotiated new guardrails for the war. Trump looks at Iran behaving as a sane regional actor and listening to the demands being made by the GCC, for example, as a sign of weakness. This is his calculation. Oh, they're retreating on this stuff. That means they're retreating because they're afraid. They're not retreating because they are behaving like a sovereign regional actor, listening to the demands being made by their neighbors, but instead as a nation in retreat, terrified of the prospect of the might of American weapons destroying its infrastructure.
This analysis nails it. Normal diplomacy involves concessions and face-saving measures. When Iran listens to regional partners, that's responsible statecraft, not weakness. Trump's inability to distinguish between retreat and diplomacy guarantees continued conflict.
Trump's need for the optics of victory trumps what should be a far more important goal, advancing U.S. interests by ending this war and reaching a longer-term deal with Tehran. It appears that this same phenomenon occurred in the past few days when the Iranians, in a very vague tweet, declared that the strait is open as a de-escalatory step. In their terminology, it has never been closed, though Tehran is only determining who can pass and who cannot while charging tolls. Trump failed to reciprocate and instead could not resist the temptation to declare victory and insult the Iranians. What was designed to become the beginning of a mutual off-ramp was instead turned by Trump into an escalatory ladder, resulting in additional threats by him this morning to knock out every single power plant, every single bridge in Iran. Trump's lack of discipline and focus and his infantile prioritization of optics over reality are becoming a significant obstacle to him achieving his own goals, exiting the war and striking a strong deal with Tehran.
Iran's strait announcement was textbook diplomatic signaling, offering a gesture that could be reciprocated. Instead of matching their de-escalation, Trump declared victory and threatened infrastructure destruction. He turned a potential off-ramp into an escalation ladder.
The part that Trita is not mentioning, in my opinion, is that this suits the ultimate desires of Israel as well. Okay? That is the real issue here. Trump gets to behave in this inconsistent manner, and he gets to behave victory, and he gets to just be more belligerent and escalate, while simultaneously people in his orbit are actively reading the room and trying to de-escalate. Trump does this kind of thing because it suits Benjamin Netanyahu's goals.
The chaos serves Israeli strategy perfectly. While Trump's advisors pursue diplomacy, his public statements and threats sabotage those efforts. This gives Netanyahu plausible deniability while ensuring America remains committed to confronting Iran militarily.
The United States of America is openly saying Israel is bringing us into this, and we are waging this war for Israel, and we're continuing to destabilize for Israel as the rest of the world experiences inflationary shocks, experiences an energy crisis. What do you think this is going to do to American soft power and American influence around the globe? And what do you think this will do to the influence of Israel and the way that people perceive Israel around the world? That is a major problem that neither America nor Israel is invested in facing.
The global economic implications are massive. Oil prices, inflation, supply chain disruptions. Also, America can fight Israel's regional rivals. This is destroying American soft power while China and Russia position themselves as stability providers to frustrated allies.
UAE to Trump administration, you started this war. If we run short of USDs as a result of it, either you will give us the USD swap lines, or we will be forced to start transacting oil and gas in CNY and other currencies. This is from the Wall Street Journal just now. Now, the UAE is the most pliant to Israeli demands. It's basically an extension of Israel, right? The United Arab Emirates. So if they're talking about Chinese yuan, that's a fairly large threat.
The UAE threatening to use Chinese yuan for oil transactions is seismic. This is America's most reliable Gulf ally saying they'll abandon dollar dominance if this war continues. When your closest partners threaten your economic hegemony, you've lost the plot.
This is a direct line of attack against American interests in the region. And the reason why it's being communicated through Western press is because they're saying, look, enough is enough. If you're reading this coming from any Emirati whatsoever, any commentator whatsoever, that means that the UAE wants Americans to hear this, okay? They want Americans to hear this publicly. Vali Nasser, Araghchi's tweet reflected an understanding in Tehran, likely based on what they heard from Pakistan, that if they took a positive step by opening the Strait of Hormuz, U.S. would reciprocate by lifting the blockade. But
when allies make threats through Western media, they want Washington to hear it publicly. This represents a major crack in America's regional coalition. The UAE is essentially saying, control your Israeli clients or lose us to China.
Trump kept the blockade in place and through his many tweets suggested that Iran was surrendering on the nuclear issue. This has only fed Iranian suspicions about Trump and that Islamabad, like Geneva, is a diplomatic ruse before another military attack. The door to diplomacy is not closed, but it has now become considerably more difficult. Deliberately or not, Trump has undermined diplomacy and raised the likelihood of more war.
This demonstrates how Trump's victory lap destroyed diplomatic momentum permanently. Iran offered an olive branch expecting reciprocity, got humiliation instead. Now they view any American diplomacy as a pretext for attack, making future negotiations nearly impossible.
Their assessment is most likely the true assessment, the correct assessment, which is that America, until it withstands enough economic damage, enough economic punishment, enough of a military deterrence, America will not learn a valuable lesson here, a valuable lesson that Iran has to be reckoned with as a sovereign state, and that you have to have normal talks with Iran as you would any other country, as you would with another country that you respect. The only country that America respects, unfortunately for Iran, is the nation state of Israel.
The respect versus dominance framework is crucial here. Iran correctly assesses that America only responds to cost, not diplomacy. Until allies impose real economic pressure or military deterrence succeeds, this cycle continues with Israel as America's only respected partner.
And the only way to change this dynamic, as I've said over and over again, is if there is sufficient pressure being applied to Washington, D.C. by allies, whether it be European allies, Asian allies, Latin American allies if necessary, and also capital owners in general. They need to be making boss call after boss call. But the problem with capital owners and all of these other European allies is that, well, capital owners are much more independent and can make those conversations happen, can actually communicate their desires to the Trump administration, but they're probably being duped a little bit themselves by the fact that there is no more bombing, right? And as far as the European allies or the regional allies, whether it be the GCC or not, they are too afraid to say anything to America. They can't say anything to America whatsoever. We just continue on the same trajectory that we've been on.
This analysis exposes the core problem. Trump's self-sabotage serves Israeli interests while damaging American ones. Capital markets and European allies remain silent while America bleeds credibility. Without pressure from allies or markets, this trajectory continues indefinitely.